parents' choice kind of begin and end here? Like how might it conflict, or is there any conflict with the Texas the Freedom Accounts here? Is there any conflict between parent choice and parent control? And where does kind of the line draw between parent choice and control and the funds that are being provided?
Right. So what we've done is everything we can to protect parent choice and control, while also protecting kind of the phrase we use is the integrity of the program. And so that means that really the only things that we're trying to prevent is anything that would lead to fraud or a kind of frivolous uses of the funds. Right. So uh, what that means is on the private school side, we're accepting only accredited private schools, and those private schools are coming through the accrediting agencies that have been recognized by the state legislature, by TEA, the Texas Private Schools Accreditation Commission. On the homeschooling and curriculum side, most of those controls are going to be about we'll have the companies that create homeschooling curriculum and tutoring and all of that come to us and say, here's all my documentation that I am a real company that exists. And then we're going to kind of move forward from there. We're not going to be implementing any sort of, oh, you have to teach these things or you can't teach those things, as long as they comply with Texas law, which is pretty broad. Then we're going to be fine there. And when I say Texas law, I don't mean that they have to comply with the Texas essential knowledge and skills, right? They don't have to teach what the public schools are teaching. More, they just have to comply with like the broad Texas law of, I think really the only restriction there is like you're not allowed to teach overthrowing America and a revolution, right? And so those are the kind of curriculums we're not going to be letting in if they're spreading like that kind of thought, that ideology. But other than that, there's no religious test, there's no secular test, there's no like we're holding you to public school standards, we're holding you to a certain kind of standards. And so all of those protections that we have are going to be targeted towards giving parents as many choices as possible. And the way this works, and we'll get into it with the PowerPoint, but essentially the way this works is we're not cutting anyone a check. We're not having anyone give us receipts. Essentially, the funds go into an account that is held in trust on behalf of the student by Odyssey, our certified educational assistance organization, and then they can be spent through that account on the marketplace. Either that's going to be tuition for a private school or the marketplace where any vendors of curriculum, therapies, educational services, other services that are approved educational expenses essentially apply to be part of. They give us their documentation on their existence, their good standing with the Texas Secretary of State or relevant authorities, and then if they're interacting with kids, there is an element of just us doing our due diligence to background check them and stuff like that to make sure that we're not funding groups that might be putting people who shouldn't be around kids, if that makes sense. So all of that kind of protections, though, are happening between us and the vendors, and we're not going to the parents about that. So we're not putting that responsibility on the parents. We're putting that responsibility on us to pre-approve all the vendors. But then once it's in, you can spend the money as you see fit. So for example, a homeschooler, let's say they're using, when I was homeschooled, I used K-12 curriculum. Let's say my parents were like, oh, I really want to continue paying for K-12 curriculum myself for whatever reason, and then use the Tefa accounts to buy all of the literature books that we need that are supplementary to the curriculum. You could do that. We're not going to go in and say, oh, well, you didn't buy this kind of curriculum or this percentage of curriculum. The only restriction we have on those kinds of funds is that you can't spend more than 10% of the program account on technology, right? We don't want people going out and like buying, a gaming laptop or something like that with the educational funds.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and that really is kind of, that's where I asked that question, because I think it is the big sum up question, is the big worry of how that works. I think what people don't understand or are having a hard time understanding is the kind of that balance of power, or how there's to me it almost seems as if there's sort of a middleman that they don't realize is there, that the state of Texas is standing between not standing between them and educating their student, but it's simply verifying how the money is being spent on their behalf. I think parents are worried that the state of Texas or some other entity may try to influence them negatively or influence their students negatively. But what's really seems to be happening to me in my research and reading into it is more of Texas is providing the funds and then providing regulations that will allow good options, so that way the parent themselves is being are the parent themselves and their students are being protected, not being limited, but being protected from any, like you said, integrity. So any fraudulent vendors or people trying to sell bad material, something that's not good. And so it seems that the limitations really are a positive thing, and really the limitations are on those who are trying to provide curriculum and not on those who are trying to receive good curriculum for their students. I think that seems to be how I've understood it, and it seems to be how you're saying it here. And I got the video. I can share the YouTube video now.
Okay,
So
awesome.
Let me see what I can do here. Okay. And let's see here. That should pull up.
Your acting Texas
Play it back.
Hi, I'm Kelly Hancock, your acting Texas comptroller. And more importantly, I'm a dad and a granddad. And one thing I know for sure is this: every child is different. Every student learns differently. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to education. That's why I'm so excited about Texas Education Freedom Accounts program. This program puts parents in the driver's seat. It gives families new options and new flexibility to choose the education that best fits their child. Whether that's private school, homeschooling, tutoring, therapies, online programs, or other approved education services. With the Texas Education Freedom Account, eligible families can receive state-funded dollars in a secure account that they control, so they can customize an education plan that works for their children's needs, strengths, and goals. Because when parents have more option, their children have more opportunity. I encourage you to learn more, explore what's available, and see how Texas Education Freedom Accounts can open new doors for your child. We're excited to partner with you, and we can't wait to see how Texas families use this program to help every student thrive.
Let me let me get the audio back here for you.
Awesome. Sorry, I muted myself. So that is our acting Texas comptroller, Kelly Hancock. He is dedicated to this program. And so he's kind of at the very top of where the buck finally stops with this program. That is him currently. Do you have the presentation, or do you want me to?
I do.
Awesome.
I have the presentation here. I could work it out where I share my screen, and then I guess you could speak as I click through it.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay.
And I can also, if y'all just want me to speak, I can also just do that. Whatever's easier for y'all.
Let me try this out here. I should be able to let's see here. Should be able to figure it out here in just a moment. See if I can pull it up. Pull it up like that. Just pulling it up with Google Slides here. Just a second. And slide. Okay. So let me share my screen. I should be able to do that. And yes, here. And can you see it on your end now?
Yes, sir. I can.
All right. Let me click slideshow, and I can click through it as you need.
Yes, sir. So the Texas Education Freedom Account Program, and we can click through to what is Tefa and click through again. It is a school choice program. There are dozens of these across America now. This program in Texas is the first of its kind in Texas. It was passed last session in 2025 and signed into law on May 3rd of last year. It went into effect on September 1st. It authorizes the comptroller, that's us, to establish and administer an education savings account program known as Tefa to provide families with more educational options. This is an increase on the public school alternatives that we have today. So that's going to include things like private school, homeschool, virtual school, hybrid school, and a whole bunch of other options. The goal is not to lock parents into one specific kind of educational setting. In the past, school choice has been things like vouchers, which were just for private school, or educational tax credits, which only worked to offset some of the taxes you were paying. So this is actually a different way. It's a little closer to a health savings account, but not quite, in that it gives direct funds to go towards a variety of things, which includes private school tuition, but there's a whole list of educational expenses that we'll get to those categories in the end. In a couple of slides, and then also there will be a parent guide that gives a lot more detail that isn't out yet, but it'll be coming out soon on what exactly all of those extra approved educational expenses are. So we can pop to the next slide now. The question that a lot of people ask is, who is eligible? The answer is pretty much everyone. So it's a child that is a citizen or legally present in the United States that is eligible to attend public school, who has at least one parent or guardian that is a Texas resident, that's with a Texas address. Now then, there's a little caveat. There's a part of this program that applies to pre-K. However, that is a much more restricted eligibility that we'll get to later, and that is just those kids who are already eligible to enroll in free pre-K. So what is the benefit of participating in this program? The benefit is access to educational funds that can be used for a variety of expenses. How much educational funds, you might be asking? There are 3 different levels of funding in the Tefa program. Students attending an accredited private school will get $10,474. Why that specific number? It's very specific. It's not actually a number in the law. What the law asks for is 85% of the average cost to educate a public school student. So we asked the TEA, what's that number? This year, it's $10,474. Next year, it could be more. If public school funding goes up, if public school funding goes down, it would be less. There is a second kind of subset of students attending an accredited private school, and that would be special education students attending a private school. They're going to get at least $10,474, but they will get an additional amount of what their IEP, their individualized educational plan, entitles them to, up to $30,000. Not a whole lot of special education students are going to be getting that full $30,000. But many will be getting an extra $1, $2, $3, $10,000. Now then, all other students, including homeschool students, get $2,000. Now then, this is where things can get a little tricky, because especially in this day and age of virtual schools, a lot of people go, oh, I'm a homeschooler, but they're actually attending like an online virtual private school. Those students can actually, if the school is participating in the program, those students who are learning at home, schooling at home through a virtual accredited private school, will actually get that $10,474. And so there's a lot of homeschoolers who will be getting more than that $2,000 amount because they're attending one of many virtual private schools that are operating not just in the state of Texas, but nationwide. Nationwide virtual private schools are invited to apply. They just have to be accredited by an accreditor that's recognized by the state of Texas, and they have to have an office somewhere here in Texas. So that's the funding amounts, and we can get to some questions and edge cases later on that. How are the funds dispersed? I talked about this a little bit already, but the funds are not given directly to parents. We're not writing parents a check. We're not, having parents submit receipts and shell out their own money and then submit a receipt for us. What will happen is funds will be deposited to an account held by Odyssey, which is our certified educational assistance organization. They will hold those funds in trust for the students, and then parents are able to access an account with those funds where they can direct the funds through an online portal either towards a private school tuition or other eligible expenses. What are other eligible expenses? Obviously, first and foremost, tuition and fees at a private school, but also a higher education provider, online educational course or a program that provides training for an industry-based credential that is approved by the Texas Education Agency. It's a long way of saying pretty much every educational group that is a certified and recognized educational group is going to be able to offer classes. So that's going to be your private schools, that's going to be your junior colleges that are offering dual credit, your colleges that are offering dual credit, online educational courses that are accredited and recognized, and also technical colleges like the Texas State Technical College. And so kids who are kind of doing the more a la carte version will be able to maybe access technical training when they're 16, 17 years old and graduate high school ready to jump right into the workforce with a high paying job. And this is something that a lot of homeschoolers are going to be able to utilize, right? Maybe, for example, my mom, great with history, religion, literature, and even early levels of math. But when we got to science and the heavy math, at that point, she sent me to a private school because she was like, I'm just not able to teach this. But nowadays, there's a lot of private schools, public schools, charter schools, and other educational providers that'll offer one-off classes. Maybe a public school will say, hey, we're going to offer our science lab course as a fee course where you pay us tuition for this one class because we already have that classroom available. That's something public schools are going to be able to do, private schools are going to be able to do. And that does allow homeschoolers to kind of have a lot more control over what they're doing, but also maybe fill in a gap where mom and dad are not experts. I know I could not teach my kids anything above basic algebra. That's just not where my specialty is. When my wife and I have been discussing whether we're going to do private school, homeschool, public school, etc. Other educational and education-related expenses include textbooks. We're still on that first slide, sorry. Include textbooks and instructional materials, required uniform, and, like I mentioned, fees for classes provided by school districts that do not qualify the kid to be included in the school's average daily attendance. So essentially, this is where public school districts, charter school districts, private school districts will be able to offer one-off courses that don't count the kid as enrolled in that public or public charter school. Other eligible expenses that are not directly education related in the sense that they're textbooks, this is that next slide, are going to include academic assessment costs. So that is things like the MAP test, if you ever want to see where your kid lines up against other kids their age and grade nationally. But that's also going to include for high school is the SAT, the ACT, AP exams, stuff like that. Private tutoring at approved tutors. There are a couple restrictions on tutors. You have to have a teaching certification or equivalent to be a tutor in this program. And importantly, you cannot hire a tutor that is within 2 degrees of consanguinity with you. What that means is I cannot hire my sister or my mom or my grandma to tutor my kids. Someone else can hire them. I just can't. You're also going to be able to spend money on transportation to or from approved providers and fee for transit situations. You're going to be able to do educational therapies not already covered by private insurance or government benefits, computer hardware or software not to exceed 10% of the Tefa amount. And then if you're going to a private school, you will be able to do meals at that private school. So earlier when I mentioned all kids were eligible except in pre-K where it's a little bit more restricted, that leads us to the question of what about pre-K? What pre-K kids are eligible? Pre-K eligibility is tied to the free public school, free pre-K for certain students program. It is not tied to, and this is a misconception that's kind of floated around that I've heard a lot recently. It is not tied to early childhood special services. So that's going to be special education services for 3 to 5 year olds. It is not tied to that. Why is it not tied to that? The legislature did it. That's not something we made a decision on. That was just how the law was written. Specifically, the law points to Texas Education Code Section 29.153. If you really want to get into the technical details, I'm 90% sure I have the right number there. But it has a limited eligibility for pre-K kids. They need to be at least 3 years old by September 1st of this year and either unable to speak English because English is not spoken in the home, educationally disadvantaged, homeless, or in foster care, have a parent that's on active duty in the armed services, have a veteran parent who is injured in the line of duty, have a parent eligible for the Star of Texas Award, that's going to be first responders who were injured in the line of duty, or have a parent that's a public school teacher in a district that offers free pre-K. The big question on what does educationally disadvantaged means? That means eligible for the free and reduced lunch program, which would be at a family income of less than 185% of the federal poverty level. That's going to be about 40,000-ish, 45,000-ish for a family of 4. So that's who's eligible for pre-K. It is a smaller eligibility criteria, but you can do either homeschool or private school pre-K. So how do we apply? The application is luckily really simple. It is available on educationfreedom.texas.gov, and it took me about 15 minutes. A decent chunk of that time was me calling my wife and saying, hey, please read out my kids' social security numbers because I don't have them with me. The application window for the Tefa program opened at 9 a.m. on February 4th, and it closes at midnight on March 17th of this year. Now, when we say at midnight, really, you have to have that application in by 11:59 on March 17th. You can't get it ticking over to 12 a.m. March 18th, but close enough to midnight, right? You need to be that 1 second before midnight. This program is not first come, first served. In a lot of other states with school choice, it's first people in line are the first people to get funded. In Texas, we are not putting people in line that way. We are taking all of the applications that happen in that application window and then running a lottery with them on prioritization categories. And we'll get to what those are. But the prioritization categories are not who was here first. So me having got my application in at like 9:40 on February 4th, I have no advantage over someone who got their application in at 11:59 on March 17th. We will require a little bit of documentation from you, but if your situation is simple and straightforward, you really only have to upload 2 pages of one document, and then everything else you're typing in. So we will need documentation that's verifying you're a lawful resident here, you have household income, and if applicable, your child's disability. And if we go into the next slide, lawful residence documents are going to include an SSN or TIN for the parent and an SSN or similar document for the student, and a Texas driver's license or state ID. With the driver's license specifically, we are not necessarily requiring you to scan in your driver's license and upload it. If you have a more recent driver's license, you're able to type in your driver's license number. We're able to verify that with the DPS system automatically, and you may not have to upload it. I did not have to upload mine. If you don't have a driver's license or an SSN or a TIN, then we will accept alternative documents, including a birth certificate, a report of birth abroad, a certificate of naturalization, a certificate of citizenship, other official documentation that includes visas, other immigration documents that aren't visas. I forgot there's like one that I've heard of so far, but I've kind of blanked on what it is. Now then, if you don't have a driver's license or state ID, which is what we're using to verify residency, and you can switch to the next slide, there's a couple other things that we can use to verify residency, including a utility bill, a lease agreement, a mortgage statement, or voter registration certificate. So if you don't have that state-issued ID that has your address on it, there's a couple other things we'll accept that have your addresses on it. Now then, what are we using for income documentation? If everything is straightforward and simple, this is actually going to be the only thing you have to upload. And that is going to be your 2024 or 2025 U.S. tax return. You can swap to the next slide. That's it. That's all we're using for income documentation. If you're using your 1040, we actually only need the first 2 pages. We don't need the whole document, just the first 2 pages that show all the standard math on them. So that's 2024 or 2025 Form 1040. or an IRS transcript that comes after you file your taxes if you don't have your Form 1040s on you. One of the common questions I get is, hey, I am in X specific situation, disability, disabled veteran, uh, don't have a job, any of those other things. I didn't file my taxes because I didn't have to. What do I do? How do I document my income? The key word there is have to. No one is prevented from filing taxes. It's just some people have incomes below the mandatory reporting limit or other reasons why they don't have to file taxes. You don't have to file taxes to the IRS. We still need those documentation. And so you can do your filing even though it's optional. And in some cases, people will actually get negative income coming back because their income is so low. The standard deductions are the way that they are. And so their AGI will show negative. We're prepared and we're ready for that situation. And so we are prepared to handle that kind of 1040. But we do have to have a 1040 even if you do not have a mandatory reporting amount of income. For disability documentation, there's kind of two different times at which you need to document your child's disability. This is on the next slide. There's for prioritization and there's for additional funding. Prioritization, our first category of kids are lower and middle income kids or that have a disability. That's where the prioritization comes in. Now then, like we saw on the amounts earlier, kids with disabilities can also get additional funding that doesn't matter what their family's income is, but it has more restricted documentation. So for the purposes of prioritization, there are three kinds of forms that we will accept for disabilities. One is the Tefa disability certification form, which you can find on our website, educationfreedom.texas.gov. The other is what is the first part of the Texas Public School IEP process, and that is a full and individual initial assessment, the FIIE or FI, I've heard someone say. And then for disability prioritization, we will accept a current or expired Texas or out of state individualized education program, the IEP. Now then, for additional funding, we are more restricted on what we can take. And so there are going to there will be kids that have that prioritization without the additional funding. And so on the next slide, for additional funding, we do have to have a Texas IEP that is current as of 2023 to 2024 or more recent, right? So those 3 school years, or obviously one that is ready for the upcoming school year. These are the only things we can accept. There's a little bit of an exception for people on military orders who are moving here with a permanent change of station, but we don't necessarily have to get into that. So I've mentioned prioritization a couple of times, leads us to the question, what is prioritization? Like we said, this is not a first come, serve program, but we're already at 130 something thousand applicants. So we can safely say that the number of applications exceeds the number of available slots. And so we are going to have to conduct a lottery to see who gets in this program year. Anyone who doesn't get in this program year will be placed on the wait list, and we are entitled to go to the legislature in 2027 and say, here's how much our wait list costs, please fund it. They don't have to fund it, but we are entitled to ask for that much funding. So prioritization category 1 is students who have a disability. And this is on the next slide. Students who have a disability and who are members of a household whose total annual income is at or below 500% of the federal poverty guidelines. 500% of the federal poverty guidelines is $165,000 for a family of 4. Now, then what's important is this goes up or down based on how many kids you have. I was chatting with my in-laws about this, and they have 4 kids, so they're a family of 6. For a family of 6, 500% of the federal poverty guideline is $215,000. So it does go up by a significant amount for every extra kid that you have above 2, and it does go down if you only have 1 kid. After prioritization category 1, everything is just income-based. Prioritization category 2 is students whose annual household income is at or below 200% of the federal poverty levels. We would call this lower income students. It's $66,000 for a family of 4 or less. Prioritization category 3 is those middle income students whose families are between 200 and 500%. So if you're making between 66,000 for a family of 4 and 165,000 for a family of 4, you're in prioritization category 3. Prioritization category 4 is all other students, the higher income students. So students who are members of a household with an annual income above that 165,000 for a family of 4. Within this category, there's kind of a subcategory of kids who are currently in public school in this category are prioritized ahead of kids who are not currently in public school. And there's a cap on this where the number of new applicants every year cannot have more than 20% of them, or sorry, the number of new applicants this year, 20% of them cannot, more than 20% of them cannot come out of category 4. Now then, there is a possibility that we don't even get to category 4, and so that cap is meaningless. But again, even if you're above 500%, it's worth applying, because we won't be able to tell the legislature that, yes, you want funding next year if you don't apply, because we just don't have any other way to capture that information. So after we apply, what's going to happen? What is the timeline for this program? Again, applications are February 4th to March 17th. You will get award notifications. Parents will be told, congrats, the lottery selected you. You're in the program in early April, that first week or two of April, 2026. At that point, if you're a homeschool family, you're good to go. You don't have anything else to do. But if you're attending a private school or virtual private school, we have to go through what's called enrollment verification. In late April to May, you tell us, I'm attending this school. And then we go to that school and we say, hey, is this kid enrolled? And the school has to say yes before we can fund your account. The transfer of Tefa funds will begin on July 1st. Families will get at least 25% of the funds on July 1st. They'll get another 50% on October 1st and the final 25% on April 1st. We have discussed how that's going to look for homeschoolers, right? Homeschoolers, being 2,000 versus 10,400, they might have all those funds available to them sooner, but that is not hard and fast in stone yet, so please don't quote me on it. With this, another important question on this timeline that people have asked is, will I need to apply again next year if I'm in the program? If you're in the program, you do not need to apply again every year. You will need to recertify. And at that point is when you're going to be able to make a couple changes. Let's say you were homeschooling and you wanted to increase to the private school amount to attend a virtual private school or a nearby physical private school. In the recertification process, you'll be able to do that. Or let's say you're attending an accredited private school, but you don't have your IEP ready yet. And then over the summer, your local public school gives you your IEP back. Then when that recertification process happens again next year, you'll be able to say, hey, I've got my IEP. I would like additional funding, please. And then that is when that triggers. The only funding educational setting that can change during the year is if a private school student goes, you know what, private school isn't working out for me. I'm going to step down to the homeschooling amount and homeschool my kids instead. In that case, that $8,000 comes back to the program. We try to put it towards another kid or another couple of kids, right, if it's homeschooling. And so we'll be doing everything we can to spend all of the money on the parents so that we can get as many kids as we can in the program. So if you do get waitlisted, you will need to reapply every year. The system will save your information, your social security numbers, your driver's license, etc. But you will need to say, yes, I still live at this address. Here is my new income, right? Because if you use your 2024 tax documents, you'll need to now use either 2025 or 2026 tax documents. Yes, I want to, do this or that. And so you will need to do a little bit of a reapplication, but it will not be the same. Again, this is a 15 to 20 minute application, depending on how much documentation you need. So it is really simple. And so if you are waitlisted, you will need to do that again next year. For more information, please visit educationfreedom.texas.gov. We have all of our disability forms. We have a toolkit. We have a lot of frequently asked questions. And if you have very specific questions, you can ask me right now, or you can email us at educationfreedom@cpa.texas.gov. CPA standing for Comptroller of Public Accounts.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Austin. That was a fantastic presentation. I do have a couple of questions that I would like to go ahead and just like a few that have been gathered. I thought most of what you asked was right on point as far as what people I think are most concerned about. But there are like just a few kind of bigger ideas, kind of long run, long term questions. One of them is, let's say, and this gets close to something you were talking about at the end, like if a student decides to, well, you were talking about if a student in private school decides to go to homeschool, but what if somebody who is part of the Tefa program decides it's just not a good fit for them and they want to like back out of it? Are there penalties or anything that someone has to worry about in the long run if for some reason they just feel like they don't want to move forward anymore?
Right. So, are there penalties? Not really, and I think the sense that we consider it. So they would any funds that they haven't used would be returned to the state. And then in future years, there's a different kind of prioritization. So next year, the prioritizations will look a little bit different. Category one is siblings of currently participating students. So we make sure we keep families together. Let's say, you had I have a 1-year-old. A couple of years from now, I'll apply for him to be in the program. He would be first in line if my older two kids are already in the program. Then comes all those income categories, and then comes a last category, a sixth category of kids who left the program and are coming back. And so, as far as penalties for leaving, all it means is if you change your mind again, you'll be last in line, right? If you're just like, I want to be in the program, no, I don't, yes, I do. And then if you're kind of flipping back and forth, it just puts you last in line, but there's not some sort of fee or charge that's going to be happening.
Okay, that makes sense. I just know it's a good question, and I thought I would ask it just to make sure. Another kind of again bigger question, long term question is in the future. So if future leaders come in and they want to change things, tighten the rules up, and so on, how would families who are already in the program be protected? Is there protection against just voting comes up and things change and people change, and I know parents would be concerned about that.
Absolutely, and ultimately, part of the problem with that is a current legislature cannot bind the actions of a future legislature. That's a constitutional term. And so, short of a constitutional amendment, they can't necessarily say no future restrictions can be placed. Now, then, what I can say is Texas is one of the best states in America to homeschool your kids or to send your kids to private school. We have some of the least regulations on homeschoolers and private homeschoolers especially, of any state in America. And that is not by accident. That is because every time the legislature has proposed adding limits to homeschoolers or private school kids, the parents have come out and said, we're not going to let that happen. And so I don't see that changing because the parents in Texas are so involved, and Texas is already such a great state to homeschool in. I was talking with a friend who's even in Florida, where they have a robust school choice system, but before the school choice system, they still had stuff like yearly assessments for all homeschoolers, whether they were in the program or not. That might not have been Florida. That might have been a different state. But like checkups, more curriculum restrictions and stuff like that. Texas is a great state to homeschool in because the homeschool communities are so active in making sure that no additional regulations come down the line. And so the program's not going to change that. And additionally, if a homeschooler ever becomes worried about, hey, I don't like the direction this program is heading, I think they're adding too many regulations to me, then they can decline to participate in the program. They can say, you know what, I'm going to back out of this program. I don't need the state's money. It's not going to be able to tell me what to do. And so they're always going to be able to pull out of the program if they're not happy with the way things look.
Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, I know that about Texas. It's one of the beauties of living in Texas. I'm a proud Texan for the freedoms that we have here. It's I hate to say it feels like a whole other country sometimes, but I don't mind. I always feel at home when I cross the borders back into Texas if I ever leave. So, okay, I feel good about that because I know even when there are even larger shifts in Texas government, things really our values hold true. But okay, so there's one thing that is a question that's come up that I don't think has been addressed at all, and it's let's say like with testing, even like with homeschool families, there's like a testing requirement in certain grade levels, or no?
So this is where it gets confusing, right? Because it depends on whether you're doing what I would call like a traditional homeschooling of mom buys books, mom teaches kids. There's no testing requirement for that. If you're getting the $2,000, there's no testing requirement for that. Now, then, if you're attending a virtual private school or another school that's participating and you're getting that 10,474, then there is a testing requirement attached to that. But that testing requirement is actually not an additional requirement from the state. The accreditors that accredit all these virtual private schools and physical private schools already require testing. And it's very specific. The state was very specific. They're not forced to take the STAR test, which a lot of people are worried about. They need to take a norm or criterion reference test. That's going to include things like what I took when I was in private school, which was the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, the ITBS, or one of the most popular non-state based tests, the MAP tests. But for homeschoolers who are homeschooling, again, what I would call traditionally that $2,000 number, there's no testing whatsoever. And then for homeschoolers attending a virtual private school or a physical private school, well, you're not a homeschooler if you're attending a physical private school. But for people attending those accredited participating private schools, getting the $10,474 or more if they're a special education kid, they are required to take a test. They already are taking those tests. And the additional requirement there is they're required to report anonymized test results to the state, just so we know how well we're actually educating kids. But for those homeschoolers not attending an accredited private school virtually, there is no testing requirement.
Okay, that was just a question I know was something that was coming up, and I think probably also being concerned with cost and not just the test itself. It's not like a fear that your student won't do well. It's a whole added thing, and so it was a question because if testing was required, then how does that relate to funding? But if it's not required, then I understand how I've been an educator, so I understand how it reflects on funding in private and public schools. But I just wanted to ask for homeschoolers. I guess kind of branching from that though, what hybrid schools where it's kind of I don't know how the classification works, but a hybrid school would be almost like a university model or something like that, or micro schools or something along those lines. Is there a difference between those and private schools?
It's going to entirely depend on the micro school and the hybrid school. So some of them are counted as accredited private schools because they went out and got accredited. And so they actually get that full 10,474 if they're participating in the program. I should state, as part of the freedom part of this, we're not requiring private schools to accept Tefa accounts. And there are actually a few hundred private schools that don't accept Tefa accounts. And so that is, they're like, we're not going to participate. And we're like, well, we're not going to make you participate. But for those virtual micro and hybrid schools, if they've gone out and gotten accredited by a state recognized accreditor, either by the TEAA or by TEPSAC, the Texas Private School Accreditation Commission, Texas Private School Accreditation, yes, TEPSAC, then they count as a participating private school. If they've not gone and done that, then what they can do is become a vendor of educational services, right? And so that's that other side of, accredited private schools, and then vendors of educational services are going to include tutors, some of the micro schools that are not accredited, or they're not, kids not with them all day, right? It's for this class or for that class, and so they're able to do the vendor on the class specific thing. They're going to be on the marketplace with everything else, including curriculum, tutors, therapies, individual a la carte classes, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so that makes sense. So whenever when we're talking about like hybrid or micro schools or private schools, it's just whether they've chosen to go through the accreditation process. They themselves already have to be an accredited school through some kind of other program. Like maybe some private schools do ACSI and things like that. So if they're already accredited in that sense, then they apply in the TEFA program if they want to accept funds. And I'm assuming that list is out there, like whoever has actually gone through the process, you have that list on the website?
Yes, and so we do have at finder.educationfreedom.texas.gov, we have the list of all the schools that are participating, as well as some of the pre-approved vendors. Now, then the general vendor applications have not opened yet because we're still working on some stuff on the back end. So your a lot of your curriculum providers are not on the list yet. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be on the list. It's just a very narrow group or pre-approved. And those are the vendors that already deal with PDSES, the Parent Directed Special Education Services grants. And so it's a very narrow list of people that were pre-approved. And we will be opening up those vendor applications for all of the curriculum providers, all of the educational service providers, all of the therapy, tutoring, et cetera, providers in the near future. When I say near future, I mean probably in the next couple of weeks. There's just a couple coordination with other government agencies that we have to do to get all of the kind of back end sorted out. And as much as I am a government employee, you'll know how government moves sometimes. So.
Yes, okay. I definitely understand how that works. I've been to the DMV and I worked at the airport once, so I know how government works at a very, very unique speed. Okay, that actually brings me to a question about vendor choice. If there is some kind of approval process, I don't know if there's like a public approval process where the public gets to see how the program goes about approving vendors, or what the checklist may be, or if there is a checklist, because families really want to know if they can rely on the vendor list to be something that is. I know you're not going to likely use worldview as a check or anything like that, but parents want to be able to know if maybe the curriculums they've trusted in the past are going to be ones that they can continue to utilize within this program. I guess that would be something that would be a concern for people.
Yeah, so that kind of guidance on what we're looking at is going to be coming out soon, probably a week or two before the vendor portal opens up, but it might be closer. Currently, the lawyers are going through it and crossing this word out and replacing it with that word. And so we are working on it. It is coming, I promise. It's one of those things. What we can say is there's not going to be a worldview lens. Like I said, really the only thing we'd be looking at there is making sure that you comply with Texas educational law of like, hey, don't teach the overthrow of America and revolution. Other than that, there's no worldview lens, there's no religious lens, there's none of that. And so there should be a wide array of classes available, courses available. And I can say that pretty much all of your major curriculum providers are already participating in school choice programs in other states, in Florida, Arizona, Iowa, Indianapolis, Kentucky, et cetera. And they should have no problem doing business here. There might be a question of it might take them a moment to maybe do the steps of maybe they need to register with the Texas Secretary of State, a couple of those other things. I haven't actually seen the guide myself in a long time, so I don't know what the specifics of that are. There will be a couple compliance things, but it's going to be entirely based on making sure that you're doing business honestly and not going to be based on like, well, I disagree with you politically or religiously, so you're not going to be allowed in. We're not conducting any sort of religious tests.
Okay, and that's, I mean, that's very good. It's just something I know people are concerned with, and rightfully so. Not a huge chunk of homeschoolers in the South in Texas are likely going to be Christian, and they're likely going to be looking for a curriculum that adheres to how they want to present education to their students in ethics and I know that, but at the same time, there's also a growing variability within worldviews in the South, and I would say that Texas would want to be representing those ideologies as well, and plenty of people who maybe would be more of a secular worldview would also still be wanting to homeschool their students for various reasons, and so that was something that I just wanted to make sure, because we want to be able to have oversight on whatever the funds are and how they're being used or how we're able to use them. And I wanted to make sure there would actually be some kind of guideline that we would be able to see eventually, so we could know how are they being approved.
Absolutely.
Let me see if I have any other questions along those lines, or let's see here. I think the way you answered that question just then kind of really cuts to the point. I don't know. I'm kind of looking through my questions here. I think that really covers all of the major questions that have come up, or any. Yeah, I really do. I think that really does cover the major questions and concerns. Yes. So let's see. I want to see if I have any here in my notes that I might want to ask. Apparently you've done a really good job, because I'm usually a person who asks questions. But
Absolutely.
you've covered it really well. It's like you know what you're doing here. You've probably done it once or twice.
Yes, sir.
And I know you, at the end of the presentation, there was a way for any families who still have questions to reach out via email. Is that the best way to contact the comptroller on this?
So if you're asking us kind of the what's and whys, that's the best way to contact the comptroller. So if it's like, what about this? What about that? Can 4-H count? We're not going to have, does 4-H count as a, education expense? We won't have an answer for you on that one yet, but we will soon. Any of those kinds of questions, that's educationfreedom@cpa.texas.gov. I'll be one of those people actually answering those emails. Now then, if you are in your application and you're like, this looks weird, or this isn't working, or I need to do this and the application's not letting me, that's not something we're actually able to do, because Odyssey's running the application. And so Odyssey will be the ones to reach out to. They have a help.tx at withodyssey.com. And they have a phone number, which I am pulling up as we speak. That is, sorry, I'm using, two computer screens, and how that can be. So it'd be help.tx at withodyssey.com. If you're running into technical issues, or it's not letting me upload, why does it say my kid is under review? Why are they ineligible? All of those kinds of questions. Those are going to go to help.tx or calling them at 737-379-2362. And so those kinds of technical things Odyssey handles, but any of the what's, why's, how's, we handle. And so that's like kind of the policy questions, us, technical questions, them.
Okay. Yeah, that helps. I guess that does leave me with one question, though. That is something I just kind of had slipped my mind. Exactly who is Odyssey?
So Odyssey is our certified educational assistance organization. They are a school choice company. That's pretty much what they do, is school choice programs. They're in a number of other states before Texas. Looking at their website, it's Georgia, Iowa, Louisiana, Utah, Wyoming. And so what they do is they run these programs in other states. They're a company that was made to run the programs in other states. We went through an open bid process in, I'm forgetting when, I think September or October of last year. And a number of companies submitted their applications to be part of the program, or to be the certified educational assistance organization. They are paid to do this by the state through the program funds. And they are doing a great job. They're the ones who won the bid in that request for proposal process, in that RFP. And we've been really, really pleased with them. They've been awesome. We had what acting comptroller Hancock, our current governor, and a whole lot of people across the nation said was the biggest and most problem-free school choice launch in the history of school choice so far. And granted, not all states have school choice yet, so someone might be able to do a better job than we did. But as far as, glitches or anything like that, we didn't have that, and we had 40,000 people sign up in one day. So it went really well. So yeah, they're our certified educational assistance organization. They're the ones running the technical side of things.
Okay, and I wanted that clarity, because I think it naturally leads to the question of, does Odyssey really have any say in the curriculum itself, or are they simply the one doing the processing the fees and handling the exchange of money and so on?
They're the one doing the processing. We're the comptroller's office is the one that decides what's going to happen, and then Odyssey executes it.
Okay. That's it. That was, I think, was a concern I had, and I didn't even know if it would be a question until we came back to it. I wanted to make sure, because eventually, I think most parents probably have not even heard Odyssey yet. They probably have no clue that that's even and the next step is going through sort of a middleman of some sort in the processing. They probably don't even know that yet. And I think that's going to be a big question for people. So that way they can understand that it's really the state of Texas is the one that's in control of what's going on as far as who's being approved as a vendor and what is being offered to families.
Mhm.
Okay. Austin, I think that is the last question I have here, and thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. You have a good evening, sir.
Y'all too. Have a great one.